I'm Nicola from Gentle Blooms, and I'm going to show you how I make a live-in plant funeral flower arrangement. I use all sorts of different plants. I've got some lovely narcissi that I'm going to be using today, but I can use bulbs, I use perennials, I use bedding plants, all sorts. And one of the main reasons people really like this sort of arrangement is that the plants afterwards, it can be taken apart and the plants can be shared with friends and family, and they can be planted in memory of the loved one that they've lost. So one of the first things I'm doing when I make this sort of tribute is I make a base for the plants to sit on. So you can see here, this one is going to be a casket spray, and what I've done is I've made this out of dried willow sticks. Dried ones are a bit stronger than fresh ones, so it gives me a nice supportive base. Put a little bit of cross bracing in to keep everything nice and sturdy. And it's just sticks, it's just tied, it's not tricky, it's just making basically a base to put everything on. You can do all sorts of shapes. I quite often do them with wreaths. I do heart-shaped ones, and it's all quite practical and easy to do. So that's the base. I'm not going to go into great detail about how I make that, but I will show you what I do with the plants. So each of the plants gets wrapped in moss like this. Reason for doing that is it removes the need to keep it in a pot and makes it nice and easy to hand out to families and friends when they're taken apart. If someone's going to keep all of the plants for themselves, you don't really need to wrap each individual one in moss, but if they're going to be shared out, it just gives a nice, sturdy, easily compostable thing to give out. The other advantage to wrapping them in moss rather than anything else, because you could put them in coir pots, for example, which is quite nice and sustainable, is when I put foliage in at the end, quite often it will go into the soil. So I don't really want to use anything else. I need something that I can poke things into. So what I tend to do is I get a bit of moss. I get my moss from a supplier from Wales who grows it sustainably and farms it ethically, so it's not being taken from places it shouldn't be taken from. I'll spread it out like that, and then I'll get these narcissi out of the pot. And then what I'll do is I'll wrap that round. I haven't quite got enough, so I'll just get a little bit more, pop it there. Wrap that round, and then give it a little squidge, get it to stay in place. Then I'll just get a little bit of string. And then I'll tie that round, take it around a couple of 3 times, then tie that off. That's usually enough to keep it in place. And then quite often I might just do one over the top as well. So if I get a bit more string. What I will do is a bit round there and round there. So I've just got a little bit going underneath as well. So that's keeping it all nice and firm and secure. So I do that with all the plants I'm intending to use until they're all wrapped in moss. You can see I've got narcissi, I've got bluebells and all sorts of things to put into this arrangement. So wrap those all in moss, and then we'll go on to the next stage. Right, so what I'm going to do now, I've got all my plants wrapped in moss. I'm going to put them on this framework. I'll turn it over actually, slightly better the other way up. I'm going to put them onto this framework and see how they look. So I've got taller plants and shorter plants here, so I've got a variety. Taller plants will look better if they're in the middle, and shorter plants will look a bit better around the edges. So I've got some erigeron, some campanula there, got these lovely narcissi, they look quite nice, maybe there. I've got some rosemary. Rosemary is quite symbolic for remembrance. I've got these really pretty tiarellas. They're a really lovely plant that likes part shade. They're quite pretty. I've got some primroses. and I've got some very sweet little bits of lily of the valley. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes getting these all on here, and I'll show you how it looks when I'm finished. So you can see I've got them all on here now. It looks quite lovely. It looks like a little, oh, I think it always looks like a little bit of a forest floor that you've picked up, and you're going to use for funeral flowers. So we've got all the little plants in place, and you can see that I have, I'm going to put my finger in here and show you, got my finger, I've got a few gaps here. So what I'm going to do next is all these little gaps I'm going to fill with moss. So I've got everything filled, and then I'm going to show you how I secure everything in place. So you can see I've got them all in place now, and I have raised them up on some boxes because at this point it's quite important to get through underneath. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put some extra sticks in, and I'm going to then tie around those sticks, and that will help to keep all of those plants in place until it needs to be taken apart. So you can see I've put this one here, and just to keep it in place to start with, I've just looped it under a little bit of string there from that moss ball, and I'm just going to do something quite similar at this end. Just get that little bit of string there, loop that through just to hold it in place for me for now before I start do the tying. And then the other thing that's really handy to do is just in between the plants is just thread some willow sticks through, and then when I go around with the string, the sticks will get caught and they'll be held down, and that will keep all the plants safe. So I'm going to finish putting all my sticks on, and then I will add the string. Okay, so I've got my sticks in place now. If we go in a little bit, you can see I've got sticks going across the top of the plants as well as around the edge. And around the edge, they sort of mimic the framework below. I've tied them in the crucial corners, and what I will do next is I will start to secure everything in place with string. So when you're tying everything in place and when you're tying up corners, it's always a good idea to leave some dangly bits because they will help you later on. So I'm going to tie my ball of string on here, and then this is going to show you now while we have these boxes underneath, which I can move around a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the string underneath, and then I'm going to bring it back across the top, and I'm just going to give that bit of a pull, and that's now really securing everything down nicely here. The sticks are nice and tight against the moss, the plants are nice and tight and well held together. So I'm probably going to bring that around twice, give it a bit more of a pull, and then I know that's nice and secure. Then I'm going to work my way up and down and tie it off when I get to the very end. Right, so I've tied everything in, everything's really nice and secure. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start to put foliage in, and the idea with the foliage is just to cover up all this framework of moss so you can't see it and fill in any gaps between the plants. It's important to choose foliage that lasts quite well out of water, so things I've got here are things like ivy, and I've got some lovely bay, which is really nice to use, some euonymus, and I've got this really beautiful rosemary which has these really lovely blue flowers on. So all of those things are going to look really, really nice in this arrangement, and they're all quite natural things that you would find growing in woodland at the moment anyway. So I'm going to start with some of this ivy, and you can see I'm just pushing it into the moss, into the soil in the plants, and it holds really well. Put a bit of bay in here. There we go. A bit more ivy in here. Sometimes you have to wiggle it around a little bit to get in. And then just start to put a little bit in between the plants just to fill any gaps. This bluebell's a little bit droopy there, so I might put a little bit in there, try and hold that up a bit. And then with this really lovely rosemary, that Go it there like that. And then I'm just going to work my way around, and I'm going to cover all the edges, fill in all the gaps, and then give it all a really good spray of water. And then I'll leave this overnight, and then what I'll do tomorrow morning, before I take the flowers along to the funeral directors, is I'll just do a few finishing touches, and I'll show you those tomorrow. So you can see here that I've now added all of the foliage. I've used bay and ivy, rosemary and a bit of euonymus. And you can see that the foliage now really completely covers the structure. You can't see it anymore. And what I'm aiming for is it's just looking like a little bit of the garden that you've picked up and taken away with you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add some finishing touches. I've already started down this end. I've got some really beautiful clematis here. It's either Warwickshire rose or apple blossom, I'm not quite sure. But I've got some bits of that, and I've got these lovely frondy bits as well. So I'm going to add those in and then give it a really good spray of water, and then it is finished. So I'm going to add all these lovely bits of clematis in, paying particular attention to these bits here because these are really beautiful, and they'll just finish it off and make it look really nice and wild and natural. So again, because everything is in moss and soil, it's quite easy to just push, especially as clematis has quite woody stems, just push that in. And then this lovely bit here can just drape over the end. If I'm not quite happy with it, then what I can do where it's laying, so I can just pop a leaf or something over it, and that will help it to lie just where I want it. I mean, that's beautiful. It looks really lovely over the end. There's some lovely clematis here. I like it, I particularly like this one when you've got lots of little buds, because they look really, really sweet. So again, lovely wooden stem, so it makes it really easy to push in. So I'm just thinking, okay, where have I got a little spot where I could do with a bit more interest? I don't want to overload it with flowers, I want it to still look quite natural. So I think I'll just push that into there. That pink sits really nicely, there's little bits of tiarella. So I'll carry on doing that. I've got some ivy trails as well. I'm not sure whether I'm going to add those or not yet. I'm just going to see how it looks once I finish the clematis. But I'll go and add all that in, and I'll show you how it looks when I've done that. So I think I'm finished now. I've got some lovely bits of clematis and clematis vines going through, and I have added a little bit of ivy. And any gaps are filled. It's not too flowered. It looks natural, not like lots and lots of flowers shoved in. So in my mind it looks like a garden rather than a flower arrangement. And I'm quite happy with that. So I'll give it a final spray with water, and I will deliver that to the undertakers. I hope you've enjoyed this little video showing you how I make funeral flowers with living plants in, and I hope it's inspired you to maybe have a go at it yourself, or when you do need funeral flowers, that you look for maybe something that's a little bit different, maybe a little bit more fitting for the person that they will be for. Thank you.